A lot of people will say this is the fourth time the Liberals have won. Is Canada just an innately Liberal country? Do the Conservatives have any shot in the future, or is this just the way it's going to go, basically, and we have to live with that?
Well, it depends what you mean by conservative and liberal and how you define it, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think that's a really big thing. So we talked about it earlier on the live cast here, on the live stream, that, you know, when you look at different social conservative issues, there are a super majority of Canadians that agree with us on reasonable pro-life policies, you know, whether it be further restricting assisted suicide because it's gone completely off the rails, or restricting sex-selective abortion, legally restricting sex-selective abortion and late-term abortion. So I think, Canada has enough of a conservative base that you can run on those issues and win on those issues as well. Mm-hmm. And to a certain extent, you see Mark Carney basically adopt a good portion of, much to Jonathan's chagrin, the conservative platform and do well with it, right? And he took the Liberals from basically an existential crisis, and in the matter of a few weeks, now they're going to form government, potentially a majority government. We've yet to see. You're right, probably not, but they'll come pretty close. So, and you have the Conservatives getting over 40% of the vote. A lot of pro-lifers being elected, a lot of social conservatives being elected, added to that caucus, as well as having close to 150 seats, right? Mm-hmm. The last time the Conservatives had 150 seats, there was a Stephen Harper majority. So, I would say that there's definitely room and probably even a desire to a certain extent for, I would say, conservative policies of one way or another.
To a degree, I think Canada is a left-of-center country, which is why a victory for the Conservatives has always depended on kind of splitting the vote between the NDP and the LPC. The other thing is, you know, Corey Teneycke said this 2 weeks ago, and I thought about this quite a lot. In 1997, Corey Teneycke pointed out that the Conservatives, in order to win, were basically running 5 independent campaigns nationwide.
Yeah, regionally, yeah.
And it's an incredibly difficult thing to do, because you have Pierre Poilievre, for example, who is quite against assisted suicide, very uncomfortable with broad euthanasia mandates. But then he's got the Quebec caucus, right? So he's presumably keeping his mouth shut because of Quebec. You have, you know, what plays in Atlantic Canada or Quebec obviously doesn't play in Alberta or Saskatchewan, which doesn't play well in British Columbia. These are such wildly different areas. And so conservatism also just means something different in these different areas. And it was interesting because in 1997, you've probably read it, there's an interesting paper that was authored by Tom Flanagan and Stephen Harper at the time. Yeah. And they basically explain in that paper why a unified conservative party doesn't work. And it's because there's too many different interests that one national party can't actually address all of those interests, which is like why right now a bunch of people in the 905 are going to be the reason that, you know, people in Lethbridge have to put up with drug addicts kind of thing. And so if you had multiple conservative parties actually pandering to regional interests and forming coalitions, I do think that there's a lot more, there's more Canadians who think like moderate conservatives and think like Justin Trudeau, because there's no brakes on this train, right? The National Post headline 2 days ago, a federal appeals court says that OHIP has to pay for a trans-identifying person, not even transgender particularly, to have both the male and the female genital parts funded by the taxpayer, right? Like, where is the constituency for this sort of thing? And why do we keep on getting this thing even though there isn't a constituency for this thing? And the reality is that the Conservatives are trying to run 5 different regional campaigns at the same time, and those campaigns are directly competing with one another. And the Liberals are so unbelievably Machiavellian, and their sole ideology is basically a will to power. So they'll say whatever they want, right? They'll run and write books about the essential nature of carbon taxes, and then they'll bust it all the way down and they'll run on having gotten rid of the carbon tax. And the one consistency is social liberalism in its most toxic and extreme form. And so, is Canada a liberal country? I think under the system that we have, I would love to get rid of first past the post. I would love to have the kind of system they have in some European countries where you could have a functioning PPC then pulling things to the right. You could have a coalition where a party with a handful of seats ends up really mattering and can advocate for policies that the mainstream party then doesn't have to, and can actually move to the right based on the fiction of, you know, giving concessions to the smaller parties. Under this system, I think Canada's a liberal country. If you look at Canada region by region, I'm not sure it's the case. Right now, though, it doesn't matter because the Liberals just got their 4th consecutive mandate, which historically speaking is kind of nuts.
I'm going to speak as, even though I'm not from Alberta and currently living in Alberta, like an Albertan, and that is the fact that when Harper won his majority, he only won like how many 5 seats in Quebec? Like he abandoned Quebec.
So if he didn't win those 5 seats, he still would have won his majority.
So I'm like, okay. So my point about this is that I don't think we actually can say that Canada is a liberal country because they just keep winning elections, because we've not had a solid Conservative Party for quite a while. And by solid Conservative Party, I mean a Conservative Party that fights the opposition on both social and economic policies. And yes, I would absolutely love for them to adopt a really good pro-life policy like Leslyn Lewis's, 4-point plan when she was running for the leadership. But it can be on so many different cultural issues that are so winnable, but they won't talk about anything. Not only does Pierre not even talk to the media, like he's get shunned from the media, which is his forte, is to talk to the media. They won't even remotely touch these issues. When we think about parental consent in the schools, when Premier Verlaine Higgs first brought that up, Pierre was asked about this, and he said, "Oh, it's a provincial issue. I don't want to, just brush it off." And then other premiers put forward their policies, Danielle Smith and everyone, and they were way more strong. And then he was asked about it again, and because the tone had shifted, he said, no, parents should have control over this, and was way more strong on this issue. So we have seen that Pierre can slightly move the needle if he's pushed in that way. So I think that if he does remain leader and we do want to win a future election, we have to push the party so that they actually tackle cultural issues, because that motivates people. And the party thinks that it just motivates lefties, but it doesn't. And if they would just adopt some of these really popular, like what you just said, that's crazy that that would be mandated by OHIP. Talk about that. It's easy. Talk about assisted suicide for minors. Talk about things that are
or assisted suicide for people with mental illness.
Mental illness. And I think he actually has done a pretty good job of that.
Prior to the campaign, yes, he did. Yeah.
I mean, but again, it's like.
But the UN thing came during the campaign.
Yeah.
So I didn't expect him to run on assisted suicide. He'd made his position clear. His MPs had gone out and talked about it. But then the UN condemns Canada and specifically the Trudeau government during the election period. I get why the other ones didn't touch it, but nothing. And there's a bunch of other issues, right?
Don't mess with the nomination process, and have more policies that more people care about than just the carbon tax. I think when we all went to convention, we all go to these talks and we hear about it over and over again, we want to blow our brains out after the first hour, because it's enough already, and it's every single MP repeating the exact same talking point, and no one has freedom of thought or to talk about the issues that they care about. So don't mess with the nomination process. Have good cultural and social policies. I'm not saying
Jenny Byrne.
I mean, that's just a given.
I think after tonight, she's not going to get fired. It's really interesting to see how
she's not going to get fired.
I don't think she'll get fired.
Which camera's the right one? I just want to wave goodbye to Jenny Byrne.
Yeah, I don't think she will. The Conservatives have basically the same amount of votes as the Liberals across the country. They almost have the same amount of seats. This is the best result the Conservatives have had, whether we agree with the way they got there or not, for almost 15 years.
But in the greater context of the fact that that this was supposed to be a blowout.
Yeah, I'm not saying that she or the team should remain there. I'm not advocating that. All I'm saying is that they probably will remain there.
I want to really retweet something you just said, because if the entire campaign boils down to which of these two candidates is better on the economy.
Yeah.
Then when he was 25 points ahead, right? Like X and social media is filled with people saying blew a 25-point lead. But the reality is that Trudeau was losing and he wasn't winning.
Yeah.
And he was a perfect counter to Trudeau because they worked really well together and they really seemed to tick each other off.
It's like Batman and the Joker.
Yeah, but when the question is economics, and you get a guy who pretends that he guided Canada through the 2008 recession and talks about how he guided the UK through Brexit, if that's all you've got, if the only thing that distinguishes you from the other guy is economics, and you've got nothing else, then you might actually end up in a position where people decide, maybe the guy who was an economist is better.
Yeah.
I might think that's nuts, and I just think the cynicism of the carbon tax thing and stuff like that, I don't respect anybody who bought it at all. Like, I have complete contempt for anybody who bought that hook, line, and sinker.
Yeah.
But at the same time, with
people.
with economics, I understand how somebody who doesn't share my convictions about any of the things that I think are currently destroying the country might look at the two of them and think the guy who wanted to be an MP for his whole life and the guy who actually was an economist, the one might be better. Now, I think they should read Carney's book, and I think that they should research people, but like. Basically, Pierre was running against the Liberals, and Carney was running against the clock. That's why he called an election so fast, because he was worried Canadians would get to know more about him. He does have a real temper. All the background information really indicates he has a temper. And so he wanted to get elected and get a mandate before people got to know him well enough that Pierre could end up defining him and then maybe bringing in
You could totally tell that when he's doing scrums, media scrums.
Look into your heart, Rosemary.
He just seems annoyed.
That's right.
Yeah, but even just any question about anything, he just seems annoyed he has to answer it.
Yeah.
Like, I'm too good to answer this question. And I think that will come out more once he's president.
Yeah, there's I forget which UK prime minister it was. It wasn't the UK at the time, Great Britain. It was like 100 years ago. And it was one of the aristocrats. He said, the most extraordinary thing happened. I told the cabinet what to do and they wanted to stay around and discuss it.
Yeah.
That's very much the vibe you get from Carney. He kind of looks around and is like, am I supposed to answer all the peasants now? This is not at all what I've come to expect.
Yeah, so where are we with the results?